I grew up off the grid in a canyon where the creek was my best friend. Most people would probably say it was the middle of nowhere, but to me, it was the center of the world. I didn't realize it then, but that canyon was quietly shaping the way I would live my life. My dad began renovating an old 1874 miner's cabin after returning from being drafted into the Vietnam War. I don't think he ever saw the world quite the same after that. So he returned to the land my grandfather had bought for a song and a dance. He had grown up camping there, and at that time, decided to make it his home. The cabin sits beside what is officially called a river, though most of the time it feels more like a creek. Some seasons it runs clear and steady. Other times it slows to a trickle or stops altogether until the rains and floods return and remind you what it truly is. The canyon was mostly chaparral, with a wild riparian forest corridor along the creek. Patches of ponderosa still grow in places, though the old pine forest the miners cut never truly returned. My dad got some solar panels and kerosene lamps and slowly fixed up the old crooked cabin, making it into something special, dragging riverbed rocks into the yard, building on what the miners had started, shaping it into something of his own. Then one day, my mother came walking down the road, and that is where my story truly begins. She used her college savings to drill a well and buy a windmill to pump water. By the time I came around, rock piles towered in the yard and firewood stacks filled most of the flat ground. And flat ground is valuable when you live in a canyon. My dad spent every weekend working on that place, not just building a home, building a legacy. I remember my parents telling me how lucky me and my brothers were. It didn't always feel like it. But when I compared my life to those living in town, somewhere deep inside of me, I understood what they meant. Living in that canyon meant waking to the sound of the creek running clear over smooth stones. I grew up with mourning doves and hummingbirds as constant companions. Birdsong created a kind of morning symphony that is harder to come by now. I grew up both tame and feral at the same time. Town was not far away, but when the sun dropped behind the canyon walls and the creek was the only sound left, home felt a million miles from everything. The creek became my best friend. I'd wake before anyone else and walk down to the water, standing in the cool current while the canyon wrens started their morning song. I became quietly familiar with the willows and the cottonwoods, climbing their branches, imagining forts among their crowns, exploring deep emerald green pools as they carved their way down the canyon in small waterfall steps. It felt like magic in a way that is difficult to explain to people who did not grow up that way. To me, it was heaven on earth. So we grew up off the grid. Not as a trend, not as an experiment, just as life. There was no hum of a neighborhood, no streetlights, no constant background noise of town life. There was weather, wind, darkness, seasons that you didn't just observe, but lived inside of. It wasn't always easy, it wasn't always comfortable, but it was deeply real. And looking back now, I can see something I couldn't see then. I wasn't just raised off the grid. I was raised in direct relationship with the living world, and that shapes how you move through it, how you listen, how you decide, how you remain still when the moment calls for stillness, and how you know when it is time to act, and you move.